opens in 1989 in East Texas, where a woman named Anna is awakened by unusual sounds inside her home. Her husband, Richard, also hears the disturbance and asks her to stay put while he retrieves a revolver from the closet. Richard checks on his son, Jordan, who appears to be sleeping peacefully. He then proceeds to the living room, where he finds someone shining a flashlight on the walls. Terrified, he does this. He accidentally ends up pulling the trigger. Anna switches on the lights, and the couple is horrified to discover that Richard has fatally shot the intruder in his eyes. After the misfortune, they promptly contact the cops. The town's police chief, Ray, comforts the traumatized couple. Ray also reveals that the intruder's name was Freddie Russell and requests Richard come to the police station and provide a formal statement. Later at the station, Ray informs Richard that he hasn't committed any crime because he shot a thief in self-defense. However, the latter claims that the guy was unarmed, and he feels guilty for his actions. Ray responds that Richard didn't know that at the time. He further reveals that Freddie was a wanted felon for many crimes, so it's a victory for the police. The couple is still shaken by the previous night's events. News of the incident spreads throughout the town, and people begin gossiping about them. While Richard is at work, Anna, who is a teacher, calls and reveals that everyone at the school is discussing what happened. Richard then goes to a nearby diner, where he notices that people are staring at him with fear. He becomes frustrated and starts drinking, although it is still early in the morning. Moments later, he is approached by Ray, who notices his grumpy mood and comforts him. He says that they are burying Freddie's dead body tomorrow and shares the address of the cemetery. Plus, Ray reveals that Freddie has a criminal father who has recently been released on parole after 20 years. The next day, Richard goes to the cemetery and observes Freddie being buried by a few people. Just then, an old man approaches him and introduces himself as Freddie's father, Ben Russell. Richard becomes nervous and apologizes for what happened to his son, asserting that he didn't have much choice. However, Ben says that it doesn't change what he did. He also mentions that he saw Richard's family photo in the newspaper and talks about his son. Hearing this, Richard begins to panic and quickly drives away from there. He uses a payphone to urgently ask Anna to come to the police station. He then rushes to pick up Jordan from school and is relieved to see him unharmed. But to his horror, he notices Ben watching them from a distance with a sinister smile. In the next scene, Richard goes to the station and asks Ray for help in this situation. He wants Ben to be arrested, but the cop responds that he can't take action based on just one comment. He states that Ben didn't even directly make a threat or break any laws. Ray suggests that the least he can do is send officers to his house and then to check on the family. Afterward, Anna chastises Richard for attending the burial. Richard then suggests that she and Jordan go to her mother's house, but she declines, saying she does not want to endanger her mother. She suggests staying at his father's cabin instead, but Richard says it is too isolated and the last place he wants to be. When the family arrives home, Richard notices that the lock of his house is broken. This scares him, so he immediately asks Anna and Jordan to get into the car and drive to her friend's place. After they leave, Richard goes inside and suspects that Ben had visited his son's room. He then discovers bullets scattered everywhere and a teddy bear with a torn eye. After this, Richard calls the cops, prompting Ray and his men to show up. This time, the police take his words seriously and agree to provide protection. Ray asks the family to continue with their daily lives, assuring them that wherever they go, an official will be assigned to watch over them. So if Ben comes back for them, they will be ready to ambush and arrest him. Ray then appoints a cop to stay inside the house, while several others lurk outside, waiting for the criminal. Later, around midnight, it's heavily raining, and Richard wakes up to drink some milk. Meanwhile, outside, a car suddenly pulls up around the house, and the officers become alert and prepared to charge. But soon they find out that it's just one of the neighbors looking for his dog. Richard then goes back to his room and sleeps beside his wife. But then in a flash of lightning, we see Ben standing in Jordan's room staring at him. Shortly after, Richard wakes up to notice water dripping in his room, coming from an open crawl space hatch. He is terrified to discover a cop lying unconscious and finds his son's room locked. He eventually breaks the door down but discovers that Ben has already escaped through the window without hurting the child. The cops go after Ben, and the family is confused about how he could get inside with such heavy security. So Ray reveals Ben must have remained hidden in the house since the first break-in. The following morning, Richard is cleaning the house when suddenly he gets a call from Ray. The latter delivers the good news that Ben was attempting to flee to Mexico, but the police caught him at the border. Hearing this, Richard is overjoyed and relieved that his family is finally safe. He heads to the station to sign a police report. During this time, he notices a wanted poster for Freddy on the wall, but realizes that this is not the man he shot. However, Ray claims that it is the same man, and that his memory may be faulty. He claims that Richard was in shock that night, which is why he cannot recall the intruder's face clearly. Upon returning home, Richard is confident about who he saw that night and cannot get rid of his thoughts. He calls Ray and claims there was no mistake, and that he did not shoot Freddy, but the cop tells him to move on from the incident and abruptly hangs up. An anxious Richard then secretly drives down to the police station to meet Ray in person. But shockingly, he sees Ray and the other officers putting Ben in a car and heading somewhere. Curious, he follows them and eventually arrives at the train station. Richard then hides in a corner and watches the cops forcibly remove Ben from the car and inject him with something. After the man becomes unconscious, the cops splash him with alcohol and leave him on the train tracks before fleeing. Seeing this, Richard is horrified and doesn't understand what is happening. He soon hears the sound of train horns and begins to contemplate what he should do. In the end, he decides to help the old man and rushes to the train tracks. He manages to save Ben just in time and takes him to his isolated cabin, located in the middle of the forest. He also chains him, and Ben is shocked to see Richard in front of him. However, they don't exchange a word, and Richard returns to his house, leaving him locked up there. The following day, Richard returns to the cabin with some food and drinks. He explains to Ben what happened and tries to clarify that he did not kill his son. He claims that the cops used his family as bait to find Ben, and he wants to know why. However, the old man doesn't have any idea about this. He still doesn't believe that Richard didn't kill his son, so the latter asks him to accompany him somewhere. Later that night, we see the two in the cemetery where Freddy was buried. Together, they dig up the body, and when they retrieve the corpse, Ben realizes right away that this is not his son. Furthermore, they notice that the corpse's fingertips have been severed, apparently to make identification more difficult. They come to the conclusion that Freddy is not dead, and that the police department orchestrated this whole thing. In the next scene, we see the two wondering what they should do now. Ben borrows some money from Richard and makes a phone call to his friend. He explains that he is in a difficult situation and asks his friend to help him. The following day, Richard is at his workplace when Ray unexpectedly shows up. He reveals that he couldn't recognize Freddy in the poster because the guy had changed his hair color after being wanted. Richard clearly knows that he is lying, but he pretends to go along with it. During their conversation, a guy named Jim Bob shows up, and Ray leaves from there. Jim then introduces himself to Richard and says that he is a private detective. It turns out he is the guy Ben had called last night. Richard takes him to the isolated cabin, where Ben is hiding from the cops. Upon arrival, Ben explains the situation to Jim and says he wants to meet his son, whom he has not seen in 20 years. The three then decide to get to the bottom of the situation and find Freddy. After some investigation, Jim discovers that Freddy had been involved in illegal activity since a young age and eventually became involved with the Dixie Mafia. But some time ago, he was arrested by the FBI and put into the Witness Protection Program. This means that Freddy would provide the FBI with information about the gangs in exchange for his freedom. However, since it could be too dangerous for him, the feds faked his death to keep him safe from the Mafia coming after him. This implies that Freddy is still alive and must be hidden somewhere under a different identity. According to Jim, the FBI's Houston department is working on the case, so he strongly believes that Freddy must be living there. He then invites Ben to travel there so they can find his son. Here, Richard insists that he wants to go as well, because he wants to find out whom he shot. Later, the three men head to Houston and arrive at Jim's ranch where he raises pigs. There, Jim conducts some investigation and finds out that a guy named Frank Miller strongly matches Freddy's profile. He has recently relocated here and has bought a new house as well. Jim suggests Ben call him to confirm, but the latter insists that he prefers to meet him in person. The next day, the three arrive at the address, hoping that it will be Freddy's. But their car suddenly collides with another car from which a muscular Mexican man comes out. He begins hurling insults and then attacks Jim. However, Ben and Jim both team up and end up beating this guy. It turns out this man is the roommate of the supposed Freddy. They then peer inside the house but find no one there. Up next, they notice several VHS tapes in the Mexican's car, which they grab before leaving. Upon arriving home, Jim and Richard begin to play the VHS tape while Ben is in the other room. He is holding Freddy's phone number and deciding whether or not to call. The other two watch the video and quickly realize that it is an adult film starring a minor girl. Richard feels sick and suggests turning off the video. However, they soon notice Freddy and the Mexican guy wielding a baseball bat in the footage. The two start brutally hitting the girl until she is finished off. Meanwhile, Ben finally dials his son's number, but upon hearing the voice, he gets nervous and hangs up. The two are shocked and utterly disgusted with the video, and Richard claims that there were many tapes in the car, which means that they must do it often to earn money. Just then, Ben arrives and asks what was in the video, but the two don't have the courage to tell him. Jim says it's best if he doesn't know, but Ben keeps insisting. Eventually, they play the tape for him and quickly leave the house. After watching the video, Ben begins to smash things in anger. He immediately rushes to his car and grabs his gun, intending to kill his son. However, the other two manage to calm him down and ask him not to act rashly. In the evening, Ben is still in the car, and the other two are getting worried about what they should do. Richard suggests taking the VHS tapes to the police, but Jim believes that the feds already know about this. These are immigrant women who illegally cross the border. No one cares whether they live or die. Furthermore, Freddy is a valuable source of information on the Dixie Mafia and important to the FBI. Richard then asks how long he has known Ben, to which Jim reveals that they served in the Korean War together and Ben saved his life. The next day, Jim and Richard are awakened by gunshots, and it turns out that Ben is just practicing a shooting. The latter explains that when a dog hurts or bites someone, the only thing they can do is either chain it up or put it down. However, since he cannot chain his son anymore, he decides that he is going to murder him. In the next scene, the trio parks outside Freddy's house and keeps an eye on him. He exits home with the Mexican, and Ben is overwhelmed to see his son after 20 long years. They then follow him and soon find out that Freddy owns a video library store. He stays here during the day and hides the violent films among the regular ones. While the other two stay in the car, Richard goes inside and has a brief chat with Freddy. He pretends to be looking for foreign movies and asks what time they close. Freddy answers 11 and then tries to talk more, but suddenly the Mexican shows up. Richard immediately leaves the store and informs his friends of the closing time, and they plan to attack him tonight. Later that night, the trio prepares their weapons and waits outside Freddy's house. Just as they are about to leave the car, they notice Freddy and his accomplices bringing a new girl for the video. Seeing this, Ben is mortified and intends to immediately kill him, but the other two calm him down. Moments later, Freddy and his group head somewhere with the girl, and the trio follows after them. They soon arrive at a remote mansion where they usually film their videos. After Freddy's gang heads inside, the trio parks their car a little further away and arms themselves. They then head to the mansion. They immediately kill the guy who is unloading the goods. After this, they each go inside separately, and Richard bumps into a man who is serving food and drinks. The man attacks Richard and pins him to the ground, but Richard manages to shoot him right in the head. Up next, a gang member notices him and begins firing at him with a rifle. Fortunately, Ben comes to his rescue and ends up shooting the guy to death. Following this, gunfire ensues in the mansion, but the trio skillfully kills all the gang members one by one. They soon hear the girl screaming upstairs and rush toward her. They arrive in the video shoot room, where the poor girl is half naked and chained to a bed. Richard covers her with a blanket. Moments later, Ben finds his son hiding in a corner and tries to shoot him, but he is unable to do it. This gives Freddy the opportunity to injure Jim and shoot his father in the chest. Here, Ben finally gathers his courage and fires at him. He then reveals to Freddy that he is his father and that he came here to kill him. Hearing this, Freddy is surprised and asks if he is really his father, but Ben doesn't say anything and shoots him in the head. After the death of his son, he also succumbs to his injuries. In the aftermath, Jim and Richard rescue the poor woman, and they exit the place. They then set fire to the mansion to cover their tracks. The following day, Richard leaves Jim's ranch and returns to his home. He enters the bedroom where his family is sleeping and lies down beside them. And that's where the movie comes to a close.